In the sterile, unforgiving glow of a penthouse hospital suite, one woman fought for 3 lives, while another planned a future built on her grave. Annalise Reed, her body failing, was giving birth to the twin heirs of the Croft fortune. Her billionaire husband, Sebastian, stood by his mind poisoned by the sweet whispers of his mistress, Victoria. As Annalise's heart monitor began to fade, Victoria's triumphant laughter echoed in the hall, a sound of victory. She believed she had won it all: the man, the money, the children. But she never counted on a mother's final desperate act, a secret test that would expose a lie so monstrous it would shatter their gilded world forever. The rain that fell on New York City that October evening was relentless, a cold, persistent weeping that matched the silent sorrow in Annalise Reed's heart. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment on Park Avenue, the city lights blurred into a watercolor of indifferent brilliance. For 2 years, this had been her home, her gilded cage. She had married Sebastian Croft, the formidable CEO of Argent Industries, a man whose ambition was as towering as the skyscrapers his company erected. She had loved him, loved the slivers of the man she saw beneath the armor of wealth and power. The man who would sometimes trace the constellations on her back in the dead of night, whispering dreams that seemed to vanish with the morning sun. But the sun hadn't been rising on their marriage for a long time. It had been eclipsed by Victoria Devereux. Victoria was everything Annalise was not. Where Annalise was quiet, grace, and gentle strength, Victoria was a blaze of calculated charisma and sharp, glittering ambition. She was a senior VP at Argent Industries, a position she'd used to seamlessly insert herself not just into Sebastian's business, but into his life. Annalise had watched a helpless spectator as Victoria's perfume began to linger in Sebastian's suits, as her name began to punctuate his conversations, as the late nights at the office became more frequent, more transparently false. Sebastian had called it stress. He'd called Annalise paranoid hormonal, especially once she became pregnant. And what a shock that had been. After years of being told she might never conceive, the doctors had confirmed it twins. For a fleeting moment, Annalise thought it would be the miracle that saved them. 2 tiny heartbeats, 2 new lives to mend the chasm that had opened between them. Sebastian had been pleased, but in a detached, proprietary way. He wanted heirs, and now he would have them. It was a successful acquisition, another box checked on the list of a billionaire's life. The joy Annalise felt was hers alone, a solitary, fierce love for the 2 souls growing within her. The pregnancy, however, was brutal. The doctors at the prestigious Mount Sinai Prestige Women's Health Pavilion had labeled her high risk from the start. Preeclampsia had set in early, her blood pressure a volatile storm threatening to capsize her. Swelling headaches and a constant gnawing fatigue became her reality. She was largely confined to the penthouse, a prisoner of her own body and Sebastian's clinical concern. He hired the best private nurses, arranged for medical equipment to be installed in their suite. It was care, but it was the kind of care one arranges for a valuable, fragile asset, not the tender affection of a loving husband. Victoria's presence only grew more insidious. She would visit under the guise of bringing files for Sebastian to sign, her stilettos clicking on the marble floors like a death knell. She would look at Annalise's swollen form with a pity that was thinly veiled contempt. "You poor thing," Victoria had cooed just last week, her eyes the color of cold jade, raking over Annalise. "It's taken such a toll on you. Don't you worry, though. Sebastian and I can handle everything at the office. You just focus on resting." The unspoken words hung in the air. "You just focus on being an incubator. Your role is almost over." Annalise had tried to talk to Sebastian to show him the texts she'd seen, the late-night calls from Victoria, work, that were anything but professional. He would shut her down with a weary sigh. "Annalise, you're not well," he'd say, his voice laced with an exasperated patience that cut deeper than any shout. "Victoria is my right hand. The company is in a critical phase. You need to stop this. The stress is bad for the babies." He was using her children, their children, as a shield for his affair. The realization had settled in her bones like a terminal chill. She was alone. Tonight the chill was worse. A sharp, searing pain sliced across her abdomen, stealing her breath. It was a pain unlike any she had felt before. She gripped the cold glass of the window, her knuckles white. 7 months. It was too soon. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window, a pale, frightened woman, a ghost in her own home. Another wave of pain crashed over her, more intense this time. A low gasp escaped her lips. She reached for the emergency call button the nurse had insisted she keep with her at all times, her fingers fumbling. The city lights swam before her eyes. She pressed the button. As the chime echoed softly through the silent penthouse, she heard the front door open. It wasn't the nurse, it was Sebastian, and with him the lilting, triumphant laugh of Victoria Devereaux. They hadn't expected her to be in the living room. "Honestly, Seb, you worry too much," Victoria was saying, her voice dripping with amusement. "She's probably just sleeping. She does that all day, doesn't she?" Sebastian murmured something in response, but his words were lost as Annalise's vision tunneled. The pain was a roaring fire, now consuming her. She slid down the window, her hand pressed against her belly, a silent prayer forming on her lips. "Not yet. Please, not yet. Let me be strong enough. Let me save them." The last thing she saw before her world went black was Sebastian's face, his expression of annoyance slowly morphing into shock, and behind him Victoria, her smile faltering for just a second before being replaced by a mask of perfect, calculated concern. The storm outside raged on, but inside Annalise, a far more terrifying one had just broken. The sterile white of the delivery suite at Mount Sinai was blinding. Machines beeped in a frantic, uneven chorus, a soundtrack of crisis. Annalise drifted in and out of consciousness, each lucid moment, a fresh wave of agony and fear. Faces swam above her nurses in scrubs, their expressions grim. Dr. Madeline Hayes, her brow furrowed with deep concern, and Sebastian standing near the door, a portrait of conflicted helplessness. And beside him, a dark angel in a designer dress, stood Victoria. She had not left his side. She was playing the part of the devoted partner, her hand resting on Sebastian's arm. Her voice a low, soothing murmur that grated on Annalise's raw nerves. Severe preeclampsia. Transitioning to HELP syndrome. Dr. Hayes said, her voice sharp and direct, cutting through the haze. She was speaking to Sebastian, but her eyes kept flicking to Annalise. "Her liver enzymes are critical. Her platelet count is plummeting. We're losing her, Mr. Croft. The babies are in distress. We have to perform an emergency C-section right now. It's the only chance for any of them. HELP syndrome." Annalise had read about it in a terrified late-night research session. Hemolysis elevated liver enzymes. Low platelet count. A life-threatening complication. She knew what it meant. Her body was shutting down. It was devouring itself in a desperate attempt to survive the pregnancy. Sebastian, pale and shaken, could only nod. He looked lost, a king stripped of his power, utterly useless in the face of this biological mutiny. This was a problem he couldn't solve with money or intimidation. "Do it," he choked out. "Do whatever you have to." As the team prepped her for surgery, a maelstrom of activity around her gurney, Annalise's gaze locked with Victoria's. The mask of concern had slipped. For a fraction of a second, Annalise saw it a flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph in those jade eyes. Victoria believed this was the end. The inconvenient wife was being surgically removed from the picture, leaving behind the two precious heirs she could raise as her own. A nurse began to wheel Annalise toward the operating room. As they passed Sebastian, he reached out his hand, hovering over hers, before falling away, as if he wasn't sure he had the right to touch her. Annalise. He began, his voice thick with a guilt she was too weak to appreciate. But Victoria's grip on his arm tightened. "Let them work, darling," she whispered, pulling him back. "We can't be in the way. We have to be strong for the children." "We." The word was a poisoned dart. The children. She said it as if they were already hers. The operating room was a cold, bright theater of steel and focused tension. Annalise felt the prick of the epidural, the slow, creeping numbness that didn't touch the terror icing her veins. She was fighting to stay awake, to hold on. She had to see them. She had to know they were safe. "We're starting," Dr. Hayes announced. Annalise stared at the reflection in a polished metal lamp above her, a distorted, blurry view of the life and death drama unfolding below. She felt a pulling, a strange, profound pressure, and then a cry. A thin, reedy wail that cut through the clinical din. "It's a boy," a nurse announced. "Born at 8:14 p.m. Weight is 2.8 pounds. A boy. Her son." Tears streamed from the corners of Annalise's eyes, hot trails on her cold skin. A wave of love so powerful it almost erased the pain washed over her. A minute later, another slightly weaker cry joined the first. "And a girl doctor." Hayes said, her voice tight with concentration. 8:15 p.m. 2.6 pounds. They're both small, but they're fighting. Get them to the NICU now. Her children. They were here. They were real. But as the relief flooded her, her body betrayed her completely. The beeping of the heart monitor beside her head escalated into a shrill, continuous alarm. "She's crashing. Blood pressure is bottoming out," someone shouted. "We have a bleeder. I need more clamps." And 4 units of O-negative stat, Dr. Hayes commanded. The world began to fade to gray. Annalise's last conscious thought was not of Sebastian, not of her own fear, but of her babies. 2 tiny, fragile fighters born into a world where a viper was waiting to claim them. Outside the operating room, Sebastian paced the hallway like a caged animal. Victoria sat perfectly poised on a sterile waiting room chair, scrolling through her phone. A nurse emerged, her face somber. "Mr. Croft." "The babies are in the neonatal intensive care unit. They are stable for now. They're premature, but they're strong." Sebastian's shoulders sagged with relief. "And my wife, Annalise?" The nurse's expression tightened. "Dr. Hayes is still with her. She lost a lot of blood. They're doing everything they can. It's very touch and go." As the nurse walked away, Victoria stood up and glided over to Sebastian, wrapping her arms around him. "Oh, darling, you heard her. The children are strong. You have a son and a daughter. You did it." She framed it as his victory. Sebastian, numb with shock and a dawning horror at his own neglect, allowed himself to be held. "She might die, Victoria." "Shh," Victoria soothed her lips close to his ear. "Annalise is a fighter. But whatever happens, you won't be alone. We won't be alone. We will raise these children together. They will have a mother, I promise you." Her words were perfectly comforting, perfectly supportive. But as she held him, she glanced down the empty corridor toward the operating room, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She had been playing the long game, a game of patience and poison, and it seemed she was just moments away from checkmate. In the theater of cruelty, she had so carefully constructed the final act was about to begin. For 3 days, Annalise lingered in the intensive care unit, a ghost tethered to the living world by a web of tubes and wires. She was unconscious, her body waging a silent, desperate war. Down the hall, in the hushed, dimly lit sanctuary of the NICU, her 2 children, Nathaniel and Olivia, lay in their incubators, tiny marvels of resilience, fighting their own battles for life. And in the vacuum left by Annalise's absence, Victoria bloomed. She had seamlessly, ruthlessly installed herself as the de facto lady of the manor. She was the one at Sebastian's side, her hand a constant proprietary presence on his arm. She was the one who spoke to the doctors, absorbing the medical jargon with a keen intelligence, reframing the information for Sebastian in a way that always subtly underscored Annalise's fragility and her own strength. She was the one who intercepted calls from Annalise's concerned family, offering placating, vague updates that kept them at a distance. "The doctors need her to have absolute quiet," Victoria would say into the phone, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's best if we let the medical team do their work. Sebastian is distraught, of course, but I'm making sure everything is taken care of." Her masterpiece of performance, however, took place in the NICU's private viewing room, reserved for the Croft family. Sebastian, consumed by a paralyzing cocktail of guilt, fear, and a strange, dawning pride, would stand for hours, his palms pressed against the thick glass, staring at his impossibly small children. Victoria would stand beside him, mirroring his posture, her head resting on his shoulder. "They're beautiful, Sebastian," she'd whisper. "She has your eyes, I think. And he has your jawline, so strong." She was weaving a narrative, stitching herself into the very fabric of their existence. She began to refer to them as our babies. She started a group chat with her own social circle, sending them blurry photos of the incubators with captions like, "Meeting the new loves of my life. My world is forever changed." She busied herself with the practicalities, a whirlwind of decisive action that made Sebastian's grief-stricken inertia seem even more pronounced. She commissioned a renowned interior designer, a man named Jeffrey Lang, to completely overhaul the nursery at the penthouse. The theme Annalise picked was so drab darling, she told Sebastian one evening in the hospital cafeteria, dismissing months of Annalise's careful, loving planning with a flick of her wrist. "We need something vibrant, something that speaks of a bright future. I'm thinking a celestial theme for our little stars." She was erasing Annalise. Every decision, every word was a careful brushstroke, painting over the woman who was fighting for her life, just 2 floors above them. The serpent's true nature, however, was revealed when Annalise's younger sister Genevieve Reed arrived. Genevieve was a firecracker, a sharp-witted journalist from Chicago who possessed none of Annalise's quiet patience. She flew in on the first flight she could get, a storm of righteous fury and terror, and marched directly to the ICU. She found Victoria holding court with a nurse discussing Annalise's prognosis, as if she were a business asset whose value was depreciating. "Who are you?" Genevieve demanded, her voice cutting through the hushed corridor. Victoria turned, her expression of practiced concern faltering for a moment. "I'm Victoria Devereaux, a close family friend." "I know who you are," Genevieve spat, her eyes blazing. "You're the piranha who has been circling my sister for a year. What are you doing here? I am supporting Sebastian in his time of need." Victoria replied, her voice turning to ice. which is more than I can say for a family that hasn't been here until now. We were told to stay away by you." "I'm guessing," Genevieve shot back. She pushed past her. "I'm here to see my sister." The clash was immediate and brutal. For the next 2 days, the hospital became their battleground. Genevieve sat by Annalise's bedside, holding her sister's unresponsive hand, whispering words of encouragement, memories of their childhood, and promises to protect her children. Victoria, meanwhile, controlled the flow of information to Sebastian, painting Genevieve as a hysterical, unstable influence who was upsetting the delicate balance. The tension came to a head outside the NICU. Genevieve had just spent an hour gazing at her niece and nephew, her heart aching with a love so fierce it felt like a wound. As she left, she saw Victoria speaking with one of the neonatal nurses, a young woman named Brenda. Victoria was handing her a thick, cream-colored envelope. "This is just a little something to show our appreciation," Victoria was saying smoothly. "Sebastian and I are so grateful for the special attention you're giving our little ones. We know we can count on you to keep us updated on everything." It looked like a generous tip, but Genevieve knew better. It was a bribe. It was Victoria, buying loyalty, ensuring she was the primary contact, the one the nurses would see as the maternal figure. Genevieve waited until Victoria had swept away before approaching Nurse Brenda. "Excuse me," Genevieve said, her voice low but firm. "I'm Genevieve Reed, Annalise's sister." The nurse looked flustered, quickly tucking the envelope into her pocket. "Yes, of course. It's nice to meet you. My sister is the mother of those children," Genevieve said, her gaze unwavering. "Not that woman. Whatever she is telling you, whatever she is paying you for, Annalise, is their mother. Don't you forget that." Nurse Brenda stammered. "Miss Devereaux has just been so involved, and Mr. Croft delegated. He's grieving and he's being manipulated," Genevieve interrupted. "I'm just asking you to remember who is lying in that ICU bed. She's fighting for her life, for them. Don't let that woman erase her." Genevieve walked away, leaving the nurse looking troubled. She had planted a seed of doubt, a small act of rebellion in Victoria's carefully managed kingdom. But as she returned to Annalise's silent room, a terrible sense of dread washed over her. Victoria wasn't just planning for a future without Annalise. She was actively building it, brick by gilded brick, right on top of her sister's dying body. And Genevieve feared with a chilling certainty that a seed of doubt would not be enough to stop her. She needed a weapon. On the 5th day, the improbable happened. Annalise woke up. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-like awakening. It was a slow, painful crawl out of a deep, dark abyss. Her first sensation was a fire in her throat from the intubation tube that had just been removed. Her second was a profound, crushing weakness, as if her very bones had turned to dust. But her eyes fluttered open, and they were lucid. Genevieve was asleep in the chair beside the bed, her head slumped at an uncomfortable angle. Annalise's weak attempt to move her fingers was enough to startle her awake. Annalise Genevieve's voice was thick with sleep and disbelief. She shot upright, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, you're awake!" Tears streamed down Genevieve's face as she gently squeezed her sister's hand. A doctor was summoned, and there was a flurry of quiet, optimistic activity. Vitals were checked. Questions were asked. Annalise's responses were weak, her voice a raw, barely audible rasp. But she was present. She was aware. The doctors called it a remarkable turn. A fighting chance. For a few precious hours, hope, a fragile, fluttering thing, filled the sterile room. Sebastian was called. He rushed in his face, a mess of relief and anguish. He looked at Annalise, truly looked at her for the first time in months, and saw not an inconvenience or a hormonal accuser, but the woman he had once loved, ravaged and broken, but miraculously, impossibly still there. Annalise, he breathed, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. She just looked at him, her gaze holding a universe of pain and weary forgiveness. She was too weak for anger. But the hope was a false dawn. Later that afternoon, as Dr. Hayes was reviewing her latest blood work, the alarms began to sound again. An internal hemorrhage, a catastrophic complication from the surgery, and the Hell-P syndrome. Her hard-won stability crumbled in minutes. Dr. Hayes's face was a mask of professional sorrow. She explained the situation to Genevieve and Sebastian in the hallway. There was nothing more they could do. Her system was too weak to survive another surgery. Her platelets wouldn't clot. It was a matter of hours, perhaps less. Sebastian broke down completely, a gut-wrenching sob of a man who had realized the value of what he was losing, only at the exact moment it was being taken away forever. Victoria, who had arrived moments before, rushed to his side, enveloping him in an embrace that was both comforting and possessive, her eyes shooting daggers at Genevieve over his shoulder. Genevieve ignored them both. Her world had shrunk to a single point, her sister. She went back into the room, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. Annalise knew. There was a terrible clarity in her eyes, the lucidity of the dying. She beckoned Genevieve closer with a faint, trembling gesture. Jen, she rasped, each word an immense effort. The babies. You saw them. They're beautiful, Annie. Genevieve said, her voice choked with tears. A boy and a girl. They're perfect. A faint smile touched Annalise's lips. Nathaniel and Olivia. She had chosen the names months ago. She took a shaky breath, gathering her dwindling strength. You have to promise me something. Anything, Genevieve whispered, leaning in so close she could feel the faint, cool air of her sister's breath. She won't let them know me. Annalise said, her eyes flickering towards the door where she knew Victoria was lurking. She'll erase me. She wants them. She wants everything. Her breath hitched. I don't trust her, General, I never have. Something she said once about a clinic in Switzerland, about ensuring a pure lineage. I thought I misheard, but her eyes... Annalise trailed off, lost in a memory of a cold, calculating look she had dismissed at the time. What do you need me to do? Genevieve asked, her voice steady despite the tears burning her eyes. Protect them. Annalise whispered, her grip on Genevieve's hand surprisingly tight. Prove they are mine and Sebastian's. Don't let her lie. Her eyes were pleading, desperate. A test. A DNA test. Genevieve was confused. Of course they're yours, Annie. Why would you need a test? A mother's... Instinct, Annalise rasped. She is a viper. She is capable of anything. She planned for this. For me to be gone. Don't let her win. For my baby's, General, prove I am their mother. It seemed like a request born of delirium, but the intensity in Annalise's eyes was undeniable. It was her final wish, her last strategic move in a battle she was about to lose. It was a mother's final gambit to protect her young from beyond the grave. There's a lawyer. Annalise continued, her voice fading to a thread of sound. Garrett Vance, Vance and Harrington Legal, in my personal safe. He knows everything. He'll help you. She squeezed Genevieve's hand one last time. Tell my babies, I love them more than the stars. Her eyes fluttered closed. The monitor that had been beeping a slow, struggling rhythm flatlined into a single, piercing, unbroken tone. Genevieve stood frozen, her sister's hand still warm in hers at the echo of that final, terrible sound ringing in her ears. Annalise was gone. In the hallway, Sebastian's cries of grief were the raw sound of a soul being torn apart. But through his sorrow, Genevieve could hear Victoria's voice, low and soothing, already beginning to manage his pain, already taking control. The war was over, and Victoria had won. But Annalise, with her dying breath, had just handed Genevieve a single secret weapon. A mother's final desperate whisper that might just be loud enough to burn Victoria's perfectly constructed world to the ground. In the week following Annalise's death, Victoria Devereaux's transformation was complete. She moved with the silent, efficient grace of a predator claiming her territory. The penthouse on Park Avenue, once filled with Annalise's quiet taste, soft neutrals books, and fresh flowers, was systematically purged. Under the guise of helping a grieving Sebastian move forward, she directed movers to pack away Annalise's belongings, donating her clothes to charities Victoria favored, and putting her personal effects into a sterile, anonymous storage unit. The new nursery Geoffrey Lang's celestial creation was finished. It was a masterpiece of cold, expensive taste. A mural of the cosmos covered one wall, with the constellations picked out in tiny, twinkling fiber-optic lights. The cribs were made of polished chrome and dark, forbidding mahogany. There was nothing soft or personal about it. It looked like a showroom, a perfect backdrop for the photos Victoria was already leaking to select society bloggers. Sebastian was a ghost haunting his own life. Drowned in guilt and grief, he was putty in Victoria's expert hands. He signed whatever she put in front of him, agreed to whatever she suggested. He saw her decisiveness as strength, her ambition as a lifeline in his sea of sorrow. She handled the funeral arrangements, turning what should have been an intimate memorial for a gentle soul into a power player event. The pews of St. Bartholomew's Church were filled with Sebastian's business associates and board members, a spectacle designed to showcase the seamless transition of power both in the boardroom and in the home. Victoria stood by Sebastian's side, a portrait of elegant grief accepting condolences as if she were the widow. Meanwhile, Genevieve, fueled by a cold, hard rage, put her sister's final plan into motion. After the funeral, she returned to the penthouse, citing the need to collect a few of Annalise's personal items she'd promised their mother. Victoria had been dismissive, but allowed it shadowing her through the apartment. With trembling fingers, Genevieve found the personal safe, hidden behind a painting in Annalise's old reading nook. The code was the date of their parents' anniversary. Inside was a simple manila folder. The name on the tab read Garrett Vance. Garrett Vance's office at Vance and Harrington Legal was the antithesis of the Croft penthouse. It was old money, all dark wood worn leather, and the smell of aging paper and justice. He was a man in his late 60s, with sharp eyes that had seen the very worst of human nature. He had been the Reed family's lawyer for decades, and had drafted Annalise's personal will separate from the complex prenuptial agreement she'd signed with Sebastian. Genevieve sat across from him, the folder on the polished desk between them. "She told me to come to you." Genevieve began, her voice shaking slightly. Her last words were about you, and about a DNA test. Vance steepled his fingers, his expression grim. "I am not surprised. Annalise spoke to me 3 months ago. She was concerned." He opened the folder. Inside were notes from his last meeting with Annalise. She had suspicions about Miss Devereaux's character, of course, but it was more specific than that. She mentioned a conversation she overheard. Victoria was on the phone with an unidentified party speaking in French, assuming Annalise wouldn't understand. But Annalise was fluent from her time studying abroad. What did she hear? Genevieve leaned forward, her heart pounding. She heard the words embryo security and the name of a very exclusive, very discreet fertility clinic in Zurich, the Weissman Clinic, Vance explained. At the time, Annalise thought it was odd, but couldn't place its significance. She believed Victoria might be looking into freezing her own eggs. But it troubled her. She felt Victoria was not just trying to replace her, but to appropriate her life, her legacy. Her request for a maternity test to be performed in the event of her death was a fail-safe, a way to legally cement her identity as the mother of her children to protect them from a woman she believed capable of anything. The plan was audacious and fraught with risk. They needed DNA samples from the twins and from Annalise. Getting the twins' DNA would be the easy part. The hospital routinely did heel prick tests for newborn screening, and Vance, as the executor of Annalise's personal estate, could legally petition for access to those medical records and samples, citing a potential genetic condition that required confirmation. It was a legal loophole, but a solid one. Getting Annalise's DNA was simpler. Vance had a notarized medical directive from Annalise authorizing the collection of a tissue sample by the coroner for genetic preservation. The final and most crucial piece was getting a sample from Victoria to run a comparative analysis to prove she was not the mother. "How do we do that?" Genevieve asked. "She's a fortress." "Miss Devereaux is arrogant," Vance said with a thin smile. "And arrogance creates opportunity." The opportunity came a few days later. Nathaniel and Olivia were finally discharged from the NICU. Victoria orchestrated their homecoming like a royal event, complete with a photographer from a high society magazine. She hosted a small, exclusive welcome home party at the penthouse for a few of her closest friends. Genevieve, playing the part of the grieving sister-in-law, was there watching from the sidelines. She watched as Victoria held Olivia posing for the camera, a perfect image of glowing motherhood. She saw her take a sip of champagne and place the glass down on a side table. Working with a caterer that Vance had discreetly recommended to Victoria's assistant, a server was instructed to clear that specific glass and keep it separate. The glass with Victoria's lipstick stain and DNA on the rim was collected and sent via a private courier to the same accredited lab, processing the other sample's GenPath Diagnostics in Philadelphia. As Genevieve left the party, Victoria stopped her at the door. "I'm so glad you could see the babies settled," Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "You can go back to Chicago now with a clear conscience. They're in good hands." "My hands." Genevieve just looked at her. "Enjoy this, Victoria. Enjoy it while it lasts." A flicker of annoyance crossed Victoria's face, but it was quickly replaced by a smug, confident smile. She had the man, the money, and the children. She was untouchable. The architect of lies stood in her newly conquered kingdom, utterly blind to the fact that the foundations were about to be pulverized by a truth she never even imagined would be sought. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, 10 days after the twins' homecoming. Garrett Vance had requested the presence of both Sebastian Croft and Victoria Devereaux at his office for what he termed a final reading and execution of a codicil to Annalise Reed's personal will. Sebastian arrived, looking haggard but composed, dressed in a somber gray suit. Victoria was on his arm, a vision in a sharp black dress that was both mourning-appropriate and fiercely powerful. She walked into the boardroom at Vance and Harrington Legal with an air of ownership, her eyes scanning the opulent room with appraisal. She assumed this was a formality, perhaps a small, sentimental bequest Annalise had left to a relative, a final piece of administrative untidiness to be swept away before her new life could officially begin. Garrett Vance sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a stack of leather-bound folders before him. His demeanor was impeccably professional, but there was a glint in his eye, the look of a seasoned hunter about to spring a trap years in the making. "Thank you for coming," Vance began, his voice calm and even. "As the executor of Annalise's personal estate, I am required to finalize all directives made prior to her passing. This meeting concerns the legal parentage and guardianship of the children Nathaniel and Olivia Croft." Victoria placed a reassuring hand on Sebastian's arm. "Garrett, I think that's quite clear. Sebastian is their father, and as his partner and their intended stepmother, I will be co-guardian. Our lawyers can handle the paperwork." She was already dismissing him. "Clarity is indeed what we are here to achieve, Miss Devereaux," Vance replied smoothly. He opened the first folder. "First, as per a request filed by my office on behalf of the estate to confirm the paternal lineage for the children's legal records, we have the results from GenPath Diagnostics." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table to Sebastian. "This document confirms with a probability of 99.9999% that you, Sebastian Croft, are the biological father of both Nathaniel and Olivia Croft." A wave of relief washed over Sebastian's face, a confirmation of a fact he never doubted, but was glad to see inarguable black and white. Victoria smiled a tight, triumphant smirk. This was good. This solidified everything. "Well, that's wonderful," she said. "A necessary but obvious formality." Indeed, Vance said, his eyes never leaving hers. A formality. However, Annalise's final directive was quite specific. It was born of a concern she shared with me months ago. She insisted that in the event of her death, a full DNA profile of the children be established, including maternity. Victoria's smile faltered. Maternity. Why on earth would that be necessary? She carried the children. She gave birth to them. A note of sharp irritation entered her voice. Annalise was a meticulous woman, Vance said, opening a second folder. She believed in the power of incontrovertible proof. This is the second report from GenPath Diagnostics. He slid another paper toward Sebastian, placing it directly on top of the first. This report compares the DNA of Nathaniel and Olivia Croft with a preserved DNA sample from Annalise Reed. As you can see, the results confirm with a 99.9999% probability that Annalise Reed is the biological mother. Sebastian stared at the paper, confused. Of course she is. I don't understand the point of this, Vance. This is cruel. It's dredging up pain for no reason. Not for no reason, Mr. Croft, Vance said, his voice dropping, taking on a harder edge. For protection. You see, Annalise had a theory, a fear. She feared that the woman who had so systematically tried to erase her from your life would attempt to erase her from her children's lives as well. She feared a lie would be told, that history would be rewritten. This document is her voice speaking from the grave. It is a legal, scientific fact. She is their mother. Victoria laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. This is insane. It's the paranoid rambling of a sick woman. I have never for one moment suggested I was their biological mother. I am their mother now. In every way that matters. I am the one raising them, loving them. Are you? Vance asked softly. He reached for the third and final folder. This one was thinner. Annalise's concerns were specific. She overheard you discussing a clinic in Zurich, Miss Devereaux. The Weissman Clinic. It's known for many things, but its specialty is gestational surrogacy, and for its VVIP clients, discrete embryonic transfers and manipulations. It gave Annalise a chilling thought that you might one day try to claim the embryos were yours to begin with, or that a switch had been made, a lie that without her here to refute it, might have been believed. "This is slander," Victoria hissed, rising slightly from her chair. "It's a pathetic, posthumous attack." "It is not slander if it is the truth," Vance said. He opened the final folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. As a final precautionary measure to eliminate any and all future confusion about your role. "We ran one last comparison. We tested your DNA, Miss Devereaux, against that of the twins." He didn't slide the paper. He held it up. The color drained from Victoria's face. The champagne glass, the caterer, the party, the trap. It shows with absolute certainty that you share no genetic markers with Nathaniel or Olivia Croft outside of the baseline for the general population. It scientifically, legally, and irrevocably proves that you are no biological relation to them whatsoever. He placed the paper on the table. The 3 documents lay there, a trinity of truth. The first confirming Sebastian as the father. The second confirming Annalise as the mother. The third confirming Victoria as a stranger. Sebastian finally looked up from the papers, his mind slowly, painfully processing the implications. He looked at Annalise's confirmed maternity, then at Victoria's confirmed exclusion. He saw the paranoia he had dismissed, the pleas he had ignored. He saw the overheard conversations, the strange comments, the possessive way Victoria had acted from the moment the twins were born. It all coalesced into a single, horrifying picture. Annalise hadn't been sick or paranoid. She had been seeing the truth. He turned his head and looked at Victoria. He didn't see the strong, supportive partner who had held him up. He saw a schemer, a usurper, a liar whose machinations had been so profound his dying wife had to use science to scream the truth from her grave. The woman laughing in the hospital hallway wasn't celebrating the birth of his children. She was celebrating the death of their mother and her own coronation. The air in the room grew thick and cold. Victoria's mask of indignation shattered, revealing a flicker of pure animal panic in her eyes. The paper didn't just exclude her, it exposed the sheer scale of her ambition. It proved that her entire performance of love and motherhood was a calculated fraud. Sebastian's hand trembled as he pointed to the documents. His voice, when it came, was a low, terrifying rumble, the sound of a kingdom of lies burning to the ground. "What did you do?" The silence that followed Sebastian's question was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Victoria stared at the DNA reports on the table, as if they were venomous snakes. The carefully constructed world she had built over 2 years, a world of whispers, manipulation, and ruthless ambition, had been annihilated by 3 sheets of paper. She tried to recover, to spin one last web. "Sebastian, darling, this is a misunderstanding," she began, her voice a desperate, placating purr. "It's a trick. This lawyer, he's trying to drive a wedge between us to honor the wishes of a what?" Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet. He rose slowly from his chair, his 6'4" frame seeming to suck all the air from the room. The grief that had stooped his shoulders was gone, replaced by a righteous fury so cold it was incandescent. "Finish the sentence, Victoria. The wishes of a what? A sick woman, my dying wife, the mother of my children. She was delusional." Victoria shrieked, her composure finally shattering. She was turning you against me. I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect our future. Our future, Sebastian laughed, a harsh, broken sound devoid of any humor. There is no our future. There is only my future with my children. Annalise's children. He finally understood the depth of her betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was the calculated parasitic cruelty. It was her smiling while his wife was dying. It was her trying to erase a good, gentle woman's existence. Annalise's final act wasn't one of paranoia. It was an act of perfect, heartbreaking clarity. She knew exactly who Victoria was, and she had provided him with the irrefutable proof he had been too blind and weak to see for himself. "Get out," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Sebastian, don't do this," she pleaded, her eyes darting between him and Garrett Vance, who watched the proceedings with the grim satisfaction of a man whose client had just been vindicated. "Everything I did for us. I love you. The only thing you love is what I can give you." Sebastian countered, his voice raw with disgust. He rounded the table and stood before her. "You stood by me while my wife died, and you planned her replacement. You walked into her home and threw out her memory. You held my children and called them yours. You are a monster, and I let you do it." His self-loathing was as immense as his anger. "My security is downstairs. They will escort you from this building. You will go to the penthouse where they will watch you pack a single bag. Anything you acquired during your time with me, you will leave. The car, the jewelry, the clothes, all of it. Then you will be escorted off my property. Your position at Argent Industries is terminated effective immediately. If you ever try to contact me or my children again, I will use every ounce of my fortune and power to destroy what little is left of your life. Am I clear?" Tears of rage and humiliation streamed down Victoria's face. She looked at him one last time, searching for a crack in his resolve, but found only steel. The game was over. She had lost. Without another word, she turned and fled the room. Sebastian sank back into his chair, his head in his hands, the rage dissolving into a vast, empty ocean of guilt. He had failed Annalise in every conceivable way. He had let a viper into their home, and his wife had paid the ultimate price. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice muffled. "Thank you, and tell me, what else did she leave?" Vance pushed another, thicker envelope across the table. "This. She wrote it for you to be opened only upon this outcome." Sebastian's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Annalise's elegant, familiar script. "My dearest Sebastian, if you are reading this, then it means my greatest fear has come to pass, but also that my deepest hope has been realized. You see the truth. That is all I ever wanted. I do not write this to condemn you. I know your heart, Sebastian. I fell in love with the man who could get lost in a sunset, not the titan of industry. I know that man is still in there. Do not let grief and guilt consume you. They are poisons, and our children need a father, not a ghost. They need the man who dreamed of teaching his son to sail and his daughter to read a star chart. They need you. Don't let them think I abandoned them. Tell them about me. Tell them I was quiet, and that I loved books and the smell of rain. Tell them my love for them was the last and most powerful thing I ever felt. It is a love that does not end with a heartbeat. It is in them now, and it is in you. Victoria preyed on your ambition. My final wish is that you let your love for our children be your new ambition. Let it be the thing that guides you. Protect them. Love them enough for the both of us. Farewell, my love. Annalise. The dam broke. Sebastian Croft. The billionaire titan who had never shed a tear in a boardroom wept. He wept for the woman he had lost, for the love he had betrayed, and for the second chance he didn't deserve, but had just been given. He went home. He walked past the cold, celestial nursery and had it stripped bare that very day. He called Genevieve, who had been waiting, and asked her, his voice breaking, to come help him. To help him choose colors Annalise would have loved to fill the room with warmth and light. His reign of ashes had begun. He had lost his wife, his self-respect, his ignorance. But in the wreckage, holding his son and his daughter, he felt the first flicker of a new purpose. He would spend the rest of his life honoring Annalise's memory, not with a grand monument of stone, but by being the father she had prayed he would be. It was a debt he could never repay, but one he would spend his every remaining breath trying to honor. So what happens when a web of deceit is finally torn apart by an undeniable truth? For Sebastian Croft, it marked the beginning of a long, painful journey toward redemption, a life dedicated to the two children his late wife, Annalise, had so bravely saved. Victoria Devereaux vanished from high society, a ghost of her own ambition, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. The story of Annalise's final gambit serves as a powerful, heartbreaking reminder that a mother's love is a force that even death cannot extinguish, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always eventually find its way to the light. Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, please consider hitting the like button, sharing it with someone who loves a story of justice, and subscribing to our channel for more tales of drama, betrayal, and ultimate vindication. Your support means the world to us.